Doctor. It's a great story. I'd like to ask you about your work and the Reaper's Dance. Look, I think if you speak to people long enough now, everybody references the pandemic, the COVID virus, the crisis. That it's like it is obviously become like World War II, World War One, a reference point for the world. And there's many negative things in that, or it's like, and there's so many points of view about it, and most people on the planet were affected in one way or another. I'd love to know what made you write a book, because look, an undertaking of a book is no easy thing. So, yes, we could all have opinions, but you wrote a book about it. Why did you write the book?
So, yes, the pandemic is a punctuation mark, a reference point in the history of humanity. It will go down in history as, there have been other pandemics, the flu pandemic of 1918 and so on and so forth, but nothing as severe as this has in recent humanity. So it becomes a reference point for the whole world for several reasons. It stopped normal functioning. It also brought the mortality of human beings face to face, and it kind of jolted humanity out of a complacent assessment of where their life was going, which is the reason why so many people decided to quit jobs and not go back into the workforce, because they suddenly realized, well, what am I doing with my life? It can vanish, and I better reorient and think what I'm going to do. I wrote a book on the pandemic for a simple reason. I saw the fear and divisive us versus them rhetoric globally, not just in the US, but all over the world. People were breaking down, and the structure of human civilization and the connection of society was ripped apart in the pandemic. And I saw 40 years of my work as a physician being torn apart by these forces in society, that the virus and the disease was only a symptom. The actual divisive rhetoric was far more corruptive than the virus. And my father once said that evil has power only in the silence of the good. Yes. So there is evil has no power except from the silence of the good. So in that statement, he basically told me that if I am silent, then I am
you're allowing the evil.
I'm actually promoting evil. I'm actually contributing to it. And so I decided to write a book about our experience. So there are several books on the pandemic already. All of them talk about the science of the virus, the lab leak, and they go into a lot of esoteric details of the science. And I do touch upon the science in my book. But I decided that I'm going to write the story about the average people at the ground level, how they suffered and how they fought back, how they came together, how they were ripped apart and how they came together, and how they confronted. And literally it was like, and I called it the Reaper's Dance, because the Reaper was, the point of the knife was on their throat, and instead of retreating, they pressed forward into the knife and pushed it back. The lessons of the pandemic will get forgotten, And it is my belief that the storytellers of the world, the writers, the authors, the podcasters, the movie producers, the directors, the screenplay writers, these people have to make the story real and lasting. Because 25 million dead, the number does not even comprehend. 5 people dying in a submarine in the middle of the ocean, trying to go
Yes.
see the Titanic. Everybody is talking about it because you can visualize 5 people. You can have 5 people. You relate to it. You can visualize 5 people in your dining table having a coffee or a drink or at the pub. But you can't visualize 25 million. On the day that the Titan exploded or imploded, the US death toll of the pandemic on that day was 1.15 million. Now, 1.15 million, nobody talks about it, but 5 people, everybody is talking about it. So the only way you can make it real is if you write the story about it. Because we all, see, there are 2 aspects to a human life. One is the ability to experience. The other is the ability to tell a story about it.
Okay.
And all of us keep moving between experience and narrative all the time. Even now, when I am speaking to you,
yes,
you are not entirely listening to me. You are listening to what you are saying about what I am saying.
Yes, my filter of what you say.
Yes. And it is this reason why 3 people will understand the same message in 3 different ways.
Yeah.
And when they repeat that same story, it will come out in 3 more different ways. So now one story has metamorphosed into 6.
Yes.
So that is the reason why things get lost in translation. That is the reason why miscommunications happen. And that is also the reason why the same concept is understood in different flavors and new dimensions are opened up. So there's good and bad in it. But regardless, the experience of hearing something and the narrative of what you heard are 2 different things.
Yes.
Now, 99% of humanity lives in the narrative.
Okay.
Freedom and happiness and joy is only in the experience, not in the narrative. I'm not saying that we should not have the narrative, but there is great power in recognizing the distinction between the 2. And there is even greater power in being consciously aware of the split between the 2.
Yes. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah.
Because once you become aware of the split between the 2, you can choose which world you want to inhabit. And at that moment, you have power over how your life manifests at any given moment.
Yes.
You can choose whether you want to reside in the experience of life as it comes to you and enjoy life without going into a long song and dance about it. Or you can choose to take that experience and command a narrative and craft the experience of the rest of the world.
Yes.
So you can be both creator and enjoyer at the same time. And you can choose who you wish to be at any given time. And there is an enormous lightness of being when you are skilled at this.
So you're saying that it sounds to me, and please correct me, I'm just trying to make sure I've understood you, Doctor, that the joy is in being present in the now, the experience,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
being conscious
So,
of the experience.
so that is the narrative description of the actual act of being in the now. Here's the thing, everyone goes around using these cliche words, right? Be in the now, be in the present, and all that. But all of that is narrative about actually being that way.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Yes.
And people get caught up in describing how to be that way and never end up being that way.
Okay, yes.
All right.
Guilty as
No,
charged.
no, no,
Yes.
no, because I'll tell you why. Because there is the human nature, the nature of communication, the nature of language is never in the now. Words are never in the now. They are always describing something in the past. To be in the now is just to remain silent and experience. But if you want to communicate it to someone else, how are you
Yes.
going to say it? You have to step away from that and you have to describe it in language. There is a different way. There is a different way where you can be in the now so deeply that everyone who comes in your presence becomes sucked into your experience silently. And they experience expansion just by being around you. When you are able to do that, you can empower people without speaking a word, just by being in their presence. That is, I'm going into a different world there.
No, I love that. I love it, and I'd like. Is that?
I use that when I'm dealing with dying people. I use that when I'm dealing with people who are hurting, and when in my job. But that is different. I mean, I don't want to get into that because then I'm right now. My conversation is already blurring the conventional limits between leadership and spirituality, and leadership and being, and so on and so forth. But in essence, the greatest leaders are all people who are that way.
Is that just an evolution? Like we talked about, when you start in your career, you learn the skills and you think this is the answer, and then 40 years later, you're just, and your student says, well, doctor, how did you do that? And you said, well, I can see it now because 40 years have taught me to hear the patient.
Yes, and I'm just now beginning to learn the skill. 40 years later, I'm just now beginning the journey. I am even more a student today than I was when I began 40 years ago. So
yes, perfect.
So that let me, because there is a flow right now that I don't want to lose. So I wrote the book because I had the experience and I needed to capture it in some way that would influence the experience of everyone else.
Yes.
And in this process, try to elevate people out of the trap of divisiveness that was threatening the fabric of human existence, and is still threatening it. It's not gone away. It's there.
Mm-hmm.
Because the reason why it threatens, the reason this divisive conversation we are having is because we look at the world only from the narrative aspect of our life. We don't look at it as huge. See, I'll give you an example. A little while ago, you said, it is being in the now. I use this example a lot because it is very powerful. Two newlyweds, they just married, they got off on their honeymoon. When the bride is embraced by her spouse, is she in the experience of the embrace or is she in the narrative of the embrace?
in the experience from
Yes,
yeah.
yes. There is no, the narrative is shut off. And therein is the joy. When a person straps on a wingsuit and jumps off the cliff, as he is falling and getting control and flying and falling, flying and falling, you see, in the experience of that death-defying plunge, or is he in the narrative of it? He's in the experience, and that is why they want to keep doing that again and again.
Yeah.
And then when they land, they tell about it. Then they go into the narrative about it.
Yes.
All right. All of life, your joyous moments, the greatest joys that you have of your life, the greatest successes of your life, is always in the experience. And then you come on a podcast and you hear somebody describe the narrative. Oh, Dr. Iyer has done this, done this, done this, done this. He's done this. Oh, today we have an amazing. That's the narrative. It has nothing to do with my experience of 40 years.
No.
So that is what I'm trying to say. I need to separate this in the conversation, because when we separate it, there's great power in it. And in my book, I tell my grandfather started the process for me. Yeah, I have a passage about it. Tell it to the stars. When I was young, there was a time in my high school when my friends who moved to a different school, and I lost my friends. I didn't have new friends. There was a new teacher who joined the school, and somehow she had it in for me, and she was giving me bad grades, making me feel small in class. So I was miserable. So my grandfather came and visited us one day, and then after dinner, he said, I'm going to go for my after dinner walk. You want to come with me? So I walked with him, and halfway down, he says, what's bothering you? Tell me. So I said, no, nothing's bothering me. No, I know you've been very quiet today, very silent. What's wrong? Something's bothering you. So then I immediately burst out. I said, oh, I hate school. I did this. So he listened carefully. And then after I finished, he said, you finished? I said, yeah. Okay, you see those stars in the sky? So yeah. It's India, so it's very black sky. Stars are very bright. So I want you to tell your problems, all your complaints, everything that happened, all the things that are messing up your life. I want you to tell it to the stars, just like the way you told it to me. Tell it loudly to the stars.
Yeah.
And I looked at him and said, really? He says, yeah, just tell it. So I thought my grandfather was losing it, but anyway, I respected him, so I started saying it. So initially I was saying it softly, and then I got more confident, and I was saying it loudly, and I finished my entire litany of complaints to the stars. I finish it, and then he says, you finish? He says, yeah. I want you to look at those stars, and I want you to tell me what they are doing with your problems. He says, what do you mean they're doing it? They're not going to do anything. Nobody's going to do anything. The world doesn't care. No, the universe doesn't care. So then he says, I want you, he says, Ravi, do you realize now the benign indifference that the universe has to your problems? I looked at him stunned. See, at 14, my problems was my universe. And he just jolted me out of that. He says, you look at the universe, the stars don't care about your problems, and they continue to shine. And then he says, Ravi, when the sun shines and when the rain falls, the sun is not shining to make the fruit ripen or to make the trees grow. And it is not shining to cause drought and famine. And the rain, when it falls, is not falling to water the grass. And it is not falling to cause death, floods, death, and devastation. All that the sun is doing is shining, and all that the rain is doing is falling. It is we who make a story out of it. And then he said, when it is you who make the story, Why do you make miserable stories? That was my grandfather telling me to separate experience from narrative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not only did he tell me to separate it, he showed me how to separate it. See, we go around telling, don't worry, it's just nothing is happening. We don't give people the tools to separate experience from narrative. We don't give them the ability to stand away from their narrative and see the power they have in what narrative that they would like to have. This is the reason why you can't break somebody out of an addiction. This is the reason why you can't save somebody from an abusive relationship. This is the reason why an athlete is not able to break out of a destructive pattern of exercise or movement. Because there is a narrative about the movement that is preventing the movement itself. Same thing. And if you can, and this is what leaders do, they, at an individual level and at a collective level, stand before a crowd and they are able to break them away from their old narrative, connect them with their experience, give them a new narrative which they can then power forth. That is what leaders do. Yeah. That is what storytellers do. That is what podcasters do. And that is what authors and movie script writers do.
It's great. It's great. That's the tool.
Yes, but you need to know how to do that. You need to know how to split experience and narrative, and you need to know how to put them back together. But this time you are in charge, not the narrative spontaneously taking over your being.
And how long would it take you to explain that?
Like that.
Okay, carry on.
You begin by first watching your breath.
Okay.
And you begin that in the privacy of your room. You can watch that. Learn to watch your breath. When you watch, along with breathing, you are actually experiencing it just by watching it. And while you're watching it, there will be a commentary, a thought that will process. And you can start, initially, the thought will be more powerful than the watching. And it will grab you and pull you away into the narrative. And you'll forget that you were watching. And then suddenly you say, oh, what was I doing? I was watching. And go back to watching. And just like any skill, just like playing ping pong or table tennis or soccer, the more you dribble the ball, the more control you have over the ball. And then one day, with enough practice, you are like Lionel Messi. Your feet are moving with the ball, your eyes are on the other side of the field.
Yeah.
And that is skill. But intent, that's how you ask me how you do this. There's nothing else to be done. There's nothing else to be done. Watch your breath and be able to separate the thoughts that prop up from the act of watching. And then after some time, when you're good and strong about it, and you're skilled at it, you can choose what you wish to pay attention to. And in that moment, you have separated experience from narrative. And you have developed power over which narrative you can give power to.
Beautiful.
See, awareness, like water being wet and flowing, like water flowing and water wetting are intrinsic properties of water. You can't separate these two. Like heat and light are intrinsic properties of fire. You can't separate these two. Like that, awareness or experience and thinking or narrative are intrinsic properties of consciousness. You can't separate these two. But you can see this as two sides of one entity, and you can develop skill in which you wish to dominate in your life.
So by developing that skill and
Yes.
practicing, you can choose the narrative, because you can't not have a narrative, is what you're saying, but
Yes,
you can
you can't
choose
stop
your
it.
narrative.
Exactly.
You can craft the narrative that is
Yes.
is successful. Yes.
So imagine consciousness like a bubbling cauldron of water. Like you have a cauldron of water, and it's heated and it bubbles up. Now every bubble is literally gas, air, surrounded by a film of water. That is what a bubble is. Thoughts are like that. Every thought is like a bubble surrounded by a film of consciousness or awareness. It is awareness that gives you the dimension of the thought. If you're not aware of the thought doesn't exist. All right?
I love it. Yeah.
But because it is awareness that gives shape and form to a thought. And you can, if you get enough control over your consciousness, you can see these thoughts rise like so many bubbles and choose which thought you wish to give awareness to. And so to destroy a thought, all you have to do is withdraw awareness from it and direct it somewhere else. For example, if I were to tell you that today at dinner time, do not think of a pink elephant. Guess what you're going to be thinking of?
Pink elephant.
Pink elephant. But if I told you today at dinner time, think of a gorilla, you're not going to be thinking of a pink elephant. You'll be thinking of a gorilla. So the only way to not think of something, the only way to withdraw your attention from something is to attach your attention to something more powerful. That is what people call, what is your why? Your why is the most powerful purpose of your life. My why is to remove fear. That is my purpose. That is my dominant thought that I will direct my attention to. And therefore, my aching back doesn't bother me. My knee doesn't hurt anymore because it's a thought. And the fact that I have to get up and go to work and see these people who are hurting and remove their fear and pain is the bigger thought in my life. And therefore, all the lesser thoughts fall away.
Beautiful.
That is why people say you have not found your purpose. That is just this. When a person, and this is the difference between finding your purpose by accident and finding your purpose by purpose. Finding it consciously is more powerful than finding your purpose unconsciously. But you see, I love my wife. We have been married 37 years. Now, my love for my wife is a created emotion. Why? Because I have to love her when she's yelling at me because I didn't take out the trash. I have to love her when she's yelling at me for leaving my socks on the floor. I have to love her when she is giving me zero reasons to love her.
Yes.
Contrast this statement with a teenager who says, I have fallen in love, like an accident act. He has no power over his emotion.
Yes.
Emotion has power over him. I don't fall in love. For me, my love for my wife has
Yes.
has burnt steady and strong for 37 years and gone through ebbs and rises, but never disappeared, because it is an act of creation.
Yes.
I choose her. So just like I say I do to her the day I asked her to marry me, I say I do, and I choose her every day, every moment, again and again. I choose her when there is a more beautiful woman on the street giving me eyes. So that is what I'm trying to say. So that is the power of choosing your narrative.
She would just laugh at this, Ravi. She would just laugh at this now, yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't show her this. I'll edit this portion out.
You direct her attention elsewhere, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Puts things beautifully, Doctor, beautifully. Interrupted you, I'm sorry.
So that's the story.
Yeah.
That's the story of leadership.
You're a beautiful man. I'm saying that, so I hold that narrative, and I'm sticking to that narrative. I had no idea this conversation would be as meaningful. I'll be very selfish now, as meaningful to me. And I know anybody who's ready for this, who listens to Leader Manager Coach, will be embracing this. Look, I cannot thank you enough for getting up early, for connecting with me and the podcast. It's been beautiful. And it's fantastic. It's blown miles above what I even imagined we would touch on. And I'm so grateful to you, Doctor. And thank you for your time and for coming on Leader Manager Coach. And I wish you, I don't need to do this because you will just keep doing what you're doing, but I wish you all the very best with your own journey, my friend.
Thank you. And to all your audience who will listen to this, go and find, there's only one purpose of life, and that is to empower. There's no other purpose. So on my Facebook page, I say there's only one reason for life. Believe that you can give back and work to find a way to do it. That's all. And that's what the Reaper's Dance behind me is all about. I wrote all the life lessons that I learned in my life into this book. In a way, and crafted those lessons into the stories of the patients who came to us during the pandemic, the ones who lived, the ones who died. There is a passage in the book that I would like to read before we close.
Yes, let's.
Give me a second to get it. It is. The passage is about the lonely death of a patient of mine in an ICU. It is raw. It is all the stories, of course, the names have been changed and modified to preserve identities, but the stories are all real. And this is the reason why on my Twitter feed, people who wish to follow my journey can follow me on my website. It's www.driyer.com, driyer.com. And you can follow my journey. I'm after the pandemic, one of the redefinitions of my life going forward from this point on is to be an advocate for the elevation of public dialogue and for making sure that people are able to expand beyond the narrow definitions that they have of themselves to change their narrative. This book is just the beginning of that process. The rest of it is outlined on my website. The stories I write about, and there are more books that I'm now involved in on neurodiversity and so on and so forth, are all focused on this. ICU day 15. The nurse steps in to check on the woman in the bed. She is barely visible, lying there somewhere beneath the tangled maze of ventilator and intravenous tubing. Above her, a fluorescent green blip dances its way across the screen of a monitor. Yellow numbers glow out readings of pulse, blood pressure, and oxygen saturation level. The room is filled with the low hiss of a ventilator motor. On the window ledge, an iPhone plays a soft playlist through a small Bluetooth speaker. But the woman in ICU bed number 5 does not notice it. She is sedated, deep under a propofol-induced sleep, blissfully unconscious of the disease that is ravaging her body, that has ravaged her body. Now, only the chemical cocktail of the drugs dripping in her veins and the mechanical bleat of the ventilator are forcing her life into being a reluctant tenant in a body fast approaching the point of becoming a dwelling incompatible with life. I have been this woman's doctor for many years. She did everything right. She isolated, washed hands, covered her face, stayed away from crowds. Her husband, daughter, and son all followed my guidance to a T. Pity that the rest of her friends did not. Too bad the neighbors on her street did not. Somewhere out there, someone had felt that they had a greater right to their breath of maskless fresh air. So this 48-year-old beautiful wife and mother will have to give up her right to all her breaths. A 50-year-old man will have to watch the love of his life struggle to give up her ghost through a cell phone video, and a teenage son and daughter will spend the rest of their lives without the breath of a mother fanning their cheeks. That, ladies and gentlemen, is both the power and tragedy of narratives. Learn to control yours.
Dr. Iyer, bless you for your time, and thank you very much.
Thank you.